My neighbor's mother accused me of being abusive while I was the only person supporting her kid, so I cut them off and didn't look back. 1 year later, she got run out of town and was now attempting to take me down too. I turned 18, the year I began despising my baby brother. That's because he was born that year. Before then, my mom and I had been staying in this tiny 375 square foot place, along with my stepdad and big brother Derek. My mom spent what few dollars of disposable income we had on hookahs and Corona bottles. We were so broke that I couldn't even remember the last time I was able to use real toothpaste that hadn't been watered down. But the more I took care of my newborn baby brother Juan, the more I realized something. It was actually not that bad. Don't get me wrong, he spent every night crying until there was no water left in his body, and his poops were practically triple his size. But he was so freaking cute. His big brown eyes had permanent stars that glowed. Upping on his tiny socks always made me tear up. So when he was 2 months old, I decided to open an at-home daycare. Nothing crazy professional, I just knew there were a bunch of moms in the neighborhood who were too busy to take care of their children all the time. I started small, charging just $15.00 a day, with a limit of 4 kids under 10. My older brother Derek never went to college, so he helped me out and took 20% of the money. By the end of the week, I was holding more cash than I'd ever seen before. We were starstruck. So much so that we started hosting our daycare at our neighbor's house. 2 bathrooms, 3 floors, very spacious. Plus she only charged 10% of our earnings for her venue. If it's to help the moms, then I'm all for it, she said. We were up to 8 kids when the problems came. Or, more accurately, the problem singular. It wasn't even the child, it was the parents. Their son was 3, blue eyes, brown hair, very energetic. The type to push the chair from the kitchen to the living room and back for no reason. Whenever his mom handed Mateo over to me, she would do it with her arms fully extended, while her face was so contorted you could have sworn she was biting down on a lemon. And as I took him into my arms, she'd practically sprint over to the sink and scrub her hands until I swear I could see red. I could never understand why, though. He was actually one of the easier children to deal with. Always listened to me, never wet himself because he was too lazy to go to the bathroom. Very smiley. But on his 3rd day with us, I noticed something. As he yawned, I saw his gums were extremely enlarged, so much so that they made his teeth look tiny. I didn't know much about kids at that point, so I simply joked about when was the last time he brushed his teeth. Brush! He laughed so hard that he almost fell over. Mommy says it don't matter, she don't love me. He smiled when he said it, as if it was the most obvious thing in the world instead of extremely heartbreaking. I instinctively went to stroke his hair, completely unsure of what to say, and when I took my hand back out to check the time on my iPhone, I noticed my fingers were covered in a thick, oily kind of liquid. So I took a closer look and noticed his hair was extremely greasy. There was so much of it that it could have been enough to supply the Burger King cooking oil for the whole week. My eyes widened in shock at the realization that Mateo's mom was probably barely cleaning him. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to bathe him because I didn't have a license, and I'm a guy, so, well, you know. But I did grab a spare toothbrush and brushed his teeth. After just 10 seconds, red started coming out, and that's when my worst fears were confirmed. But I needed the crystal clear evidence before taking action. So I hid a pea-size amount of baby powder near his scalp. The next day, it was still there. And by the end of the week, Mateo's hair smelled so bad that I could barely even pull him onto my lap without gagging, not to mention his tongue, that was covered in a thick layer of yellow crust. As I stared into his big, innocent eyes, so filled with love and potential, I knew I had to do it. I pulled out my iPhone and dialed for CPS. There is a child that I'm in contact with that is being completely neglected by his mother, I said, my tone sharp. Oh, okay, so how many injuries or cuts can you see on him? The social worker asked, as if Mateo was a statistic rather than a real child. This isn't violence, it's neglect. The mother isn't bathing him or brushing his teeth. Wait! The social worker stopped me, before laughing like a pig. So the mom simply doesn't have a nighttime routine for her kid, so you're calling CPS. My heart dropped, and before I could even respond, she hung up. That's when I knew it was on me to take matters into my own hands. So later that day, before his mom came to pick him up, I told my big brother. He thought I was exaggerating, until I showed him Mateo. Derek's face scrunched up as soon as he caught a whiff, and his eyes instantly had this faraway look, like he was thinking about what to do. Right, he said, his tone dripping with stern confidence. Leave it to me, just trust me. I nodded and handed Mateo over, and when his mom arrived 20 minutes later, I regretted ever saying anything, because Derek completely lost his mind. He didn't yell or scream. That would have been easier to handle. Instead, he pulled out his phone and started recording as soon as she walked in, capturing her disgusted expression as she reached for her son. "Don't touch him yet," Derek said, his voice eerily calm. "I want to document his condition first." He proceeded to calmly catalog everything: the greasy hair with baby powder still visible, the inflamed gums, the crusted tongue, all while Mateo's mom stood frozen, her face cycling through confusion, anger, and finally, fear. "What are you doing?" she hissed, glancing nervously at the door. Her fingers twisted the strap of her purse, knuckles white with tension. The other parents had already picked up their children, leaving just us, Mateo, and his mother in Mrs. Rodriguez's living room. "Creating evidence," Derek replied. "Since CPS didn't take my brother seriously, I'm making sure they have to this time." He turned to Mateo. "Hey buddy, when was the last time you had a bath?" His voice was gentle but clear, the phone still recording everything. Mateo's brow furrowed in genuine confusion. What's a bath? The question hung in the air, devastating in its innocence. Mrs. Rodriguez, who had been watching from her rocking chair, let out a soft gasp. The mother lunged forward, grabbing Mateo roughly by the arm. "We're leaving, and if you show that video to anyone, I'll sue you for filming my child without permission." Her voice was low and threatening, eyes darting between Derek's phone and the door like a cornered animal. Derek smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Go ahead, but first you might want to know that I've already sent this to my email, my brother's email, and our neighbor who owns this house. Oh, and I called CPS again while you were on your way here. They should be at your house in about an hour." His confidence was unwavering, though I knew he was bluffing about the last part. Her face drained of color. "You can't prove anything. It's your word against mine." She pulled Mateo closer to her side, though she was careful not to actually touch him more than necessary. "Actually," Derek said, holding up his phone, "it's your son's word, and his body's condition. And this recording of you admitting you're going to sue rather than address his neglect." The afternoon light from the window caught the screen, reflecting onto Derek's determined face. She grabbed Mateo and stormed out, practically dragging him behind her. The door slammed so hard that one of Mrs. Rodriguez's family photos fell from the wall, the frame cracking as it hit the floor. I turned to Derek, my heart racing. "What did you do?" "She's going to make our lives hell." My voice came out higher than I intended, panic rising in my chest. All I could think about was our daycare, our reputation, the money we desperately needed. Derek shook his head. "No, she won't, because if she tries anything, this recording goes public, and I made sure the CPS worker I spoke to knows exactly what to look for." He showed me the video he'd taken, which clearly documented everything we'd noticed about Mateo's condition. Mrs. Rodriguez moved slowly to pick up the fallen photo, her arthritic hands carefully removing the broken glass. "You did the right thing," she said quietly. "That boy needs help. Whatever comes next, you remember that." 2 days later, a different social worker showed up at our door. This one had kind eyes and a determined set to her jaw. She introduced herself as Olivia and asked to speak with us about Mateo. Her notebook was already open, pen poised to take notes, unlike the previous worker who couldn't be bothered to listen. "I want to apologize for my colleague's response to your initial report," she said, settling onto our worn couch. "We've been severely understaffed, and unfortunately, neglect cases sometimes get overlooked in favor of physical abuse. But that's no excuse." She tucked a strand of graying hair behind her ear, her expression genuinely regretful. She explained that they'd conducted a home visit and found conditions consistent with our report. "Mateo has been temporarily placed with his aunt while we investigate further. I wanted to thank you personally for your persistence. Many people would have given up after that first call." Her words validated everything we'd done, easing some of the guilt I'd been carrying. Relief flooded through me, but it was short-lived. The next morning, Mateo's mom showed up at our daycare, her eyes wild with fury. She pushed past me into Mrs. Rodriguez's house, ignoring my attempts to block the doorway. "You think you've won?" she snarled, jabbing a finger at my chest. "You've ruined my life. Now I'm going to ruin yours." Her breath smelled of cigarettes and coffee, her finger leaving a small mark on my shirt where she'd poked me. She turned to the other parents, dropping off their children. "Did you know these two are under investigation themselves? They've been hurting the children here. My poor Mateo came home with bruises." Her voice carried through the house, ensuring everyone heard her accusations. The parents gathered around, their faces shifting from confusion to concern. Some pulled their children closer, instinctively, eyes darting between us and Mateo's mother. The room felt suddenly smaller, the air thick with tension. "That's a lie," I said, but the damage was already done. One by one, parents pulled their children away, promising to look into this, but clearly not wanting to take any chances. I could see the doubt in their eyes, the way they looked at their own children as if checking for signs of mistreatment. By the end of the day, we were down to just 2 kids. By the end of the week, we had none. Mateo's mom had effectively destroyed our business with a few well-placed lies. The house that had been filled with children's laughter was now silent except for Juan's occasional cries. Derek was furious. "We did the right thing, and this is what we get?" he fumed, pacing our tiny living room. "We should fight back. Tell everyone what really happened." His hands were clenched into fists, face flushed with anger. I hadn't seen him this upset since our dad left, but it wasn't that simple. Mateo's mom had been busy, spreading rumors throughout the neighborhood that we were the ones who had hurt Mateo, that we had fabricated the neglect claims because she'd caught us mistreating him. It was a classic case of getting ahead of the story, and she'd done it masterfully. Our neighbor, terrified of being associated with alleged child abusers, asked us not to use her house anymore. She believed us, she said, but couldn't risk her reputation in the community. Her eyes were sad as she told us, her hands trembling slightly as she offered us tea one last time. Our income disappeared overnight. We were back to watering down toothpaste and counting pennies. The brief taste of financial stability made its loss even more painful. I found myself staring at the empty toothpaste tube, remembering how good it had felt to use the real thing, how quickly that small luxury had been snatched away. The worst part was seeing Juan, now almost 3 months old, having to go without the new things we'd just started being able to afford for him. Special formula that didn't give him gas, the softer diapers that didn't irritate his skin, the tiny stuffed elephant he loved to cuddle, all luxuries we could no longer justify. I'd lie awake at night, listening to him breathe in his makeshift drawer bed, promising him silently that somehow I'd make things better. But I couldn't regret what we'd done. Every time I thought of Mateo's smile, I knew we'd made the right choice. That gap-toothed grin, the way his eyes lit up when someone showed him kindness, it was worth fighting for, even if we were suffering the consequences. 2 weeks later, Olivia called with an update. "Mateo's father has been located," she said, her voice bright with good news. "He's been searching for his son for years after the mother disappeared with him. He's been granted temporary custody while we continue our investigation." The relief in her voice matched what I felt. Finally, some good news in this whole mess. At least something good had come from all this, but our reputation remained in tatters. Mateo's mom continued her campaign against us, now claiming we had tried to extort money from her in exchange for not reporting her. Some neighbors crossed the street to avoid us, others openly glared. The whispers followed us everywhere. At the grocery store, the bus stop, even church. Derek suggested we record her making threats and use it as evidence, but I was wary of escalating the situation further. We were already struggling enough without adding more conflict to the mix. Besides, I wasn't sure anyone would believe us at this point. Then came the breaking point. Derek and I were at the local grocery store when we overheard 2 mothers talking. They were in the next aisle, their voices carrying over the shelves of canned goods. I froze, nudging Derek to listen. "I heard those daycare boys actually hurt that poor child," one said. The mother showed me pictures of bruises on his arms. She spoke with the authority of someone sharing confirmed facts, rather than rumors. "I always thought something was off about them," the other replied. "Living in that tiny house, suddenly starting a daycare, probably needed money for substances." The casual cruelty of the assumptions stung worse than I expected. Derek couldn't contain himself. He marched over, phone in hand. "Would you like to hear what really happened?" he asked, his voice tight with controlled anger. The women jumped, startled by his sudden appearance around the corner of the aisle. Before they could respond, he played the recording he'd made of Mateo's mom, her disgusted reaction to her own child, Mateo's confusion about bathing, her threats when confronted. The women listened, their expressions shifting from suspicion to shock. Other shoppers slowed their carts, drawn by the confrontation and the disturbing audio playing from Derek's phone. "She's been lying to everyone," Derek said when the recording ended. "We reported her for neglect, and this is her revenge. Those bruises? They appeared after Mateo was removed from our care. Think about it." His voice cracked slightly on the last words, raw emotion breaking through his composed facade. The women exchanged glances. "Why haven't you shown this to everyone?" one asked, her previous certainty replaced with confusion. Derek smiled grimly. "We are now. Starting with you." He looked each woman directly in the eyes, making sure his point landed. Word spread quickly after that. Derek created multiple copies of the recording and shared them strategically with key neighborhood gossips. We made sure Olivia from CPS had a copy as well, in case Mateo's mom tried to claim the bruises came from us. The evidence was undeniable once people actually saw and heard it. Slowly, the tide began to turn. Parents who had pulled their children from our daycare reached out, apologizing for believing the rumors. Our neighbor invited us back to use her house again. Even the first CPS worker called, shamefaced, to apologize for dismissing our concerns. But Mateo's mom wasn't finished. She escalated her claims, now saying we had not only abused Mateo, but were running some kind of child trafficking operation. The accusations were so outlandish that most people dismissed them outright, but a few troubling believers remained. They would drive by our house slowly, watching us with suspicious eyes. Anonymous calls to the police brought officers to our door, though they always left without taking action. One night, a brick came through our window with a note, "Child abusers get what they deserve." The crash woke Juan, who screamed in terror at the sudden noise. Glass scattered across our living room floor, glittering dangerously in the moonlight. The note was written in red marker, the letters jagged and angry. Derek wanted to go to the police, but I worried it would only make things worse. We were stuck in a nightmare of someone else's making, all because we'd tried to help a neglected child. We took turns staying awake at night, watching the windows, jumping at every sound outside. Then, unexpectedly, salvation came from Mateo himself. His father, grateful beyond words for our intervention, reached out through Olivia. He wanted to meet us and thank us personally. More importantly, he wanted to clear our banes. He arranged a community meeting at the local church, where he stood before our neighbors and told the truth, how Mateo's mother had taken his son and disappeared for years, how we had been the only ones to notice and report the neglect, how Mateo was now thriving in his care. "My son had never used a toothbrush before these young men helped him," he said, his voice breaking. "He didn't know what a bath was. The pediatrician says he was severely malnourished and suffering from multiple infections. They didn't hurt my boy, they saved him." His testimony silenced the room, the weight of his words settling over everyone present. Mateo's mom didn't show up to defend herself. We later learned she'd left town as soon as she realized Mateo's father was involved, perhaps fearing legal repercussions beyond just the neglect charge. Her apartment was found empty, bills unpaid, belongings abandoned, in her haste to disappear. Our reputation was restored almost overnight. Parents begged us to reopen the daycare, offering to pay more than our original rates. Our neighbor welcomed us back with open arms and refused to take her 10% cut, insisting we needed it more after everything we'd been through. "You boys have earned every penny," she said, patting my cheek affectionately. Within a month, we were back to 8 children and making more money than before. The parents now trusted us completely, seeing firsthand how we'd put a child's welfare above our own interests. Some even brought us home-cooked meals or hand-me-down clothes for Juan, small gestures of support that meant the world to us. Derek used some of our savings to take proper childcare certification courses, and I enrolled in early childhood education classes at the community college. We were determined to do things right, to create a safe haven for children like Mateo. The textbooks were expensive, but worth every penny, as we learned proper techniques for child development, nutrition, and safety. Juan, now 6 months old and babbling happily, became the unofficial mascot of our daycare. The children adored him, and he soaked up the attention like a sponge. His first tooth had come in, a tiny white pearl that he showed off with drooly grins. He was sitting up on his own now, reaching for toys with determined little hands. Our mom, seeing our success, even cut back on her hookah and Corona purchases, instead investing in better food and supplies for the house. She started helping with the daycare occasionally, her maternal instincts reawakening as she saw how we'd turned our lives around. The house still felt too small, but somehow it seemed brighter now, filled with purpose rather than just survival. 1 year after we first met Mateo, we received a photo from his father. In it, Mateo stood proudly in front of a birthday cake, his smile wide and healthy, his hair clean and shining in the light. He looked like a different child, cheeks full, eyes bright, standing tall with confidence. The cake had 4 candles, one for each year of his young life. "Thank you for giving my son his life back," the accompanying note read. "You'll always be his heroes." The simple words brought tears to my eyes, confirmation that all the struggle had been worthwhile. Derek framed the photo and hung it in our daycare, a reminder of why we started this journey in the first place. Whenever we faced challenges, a difficult parent, a child having a bad day, the endless paperwork of running a legitimate childcare business. We'd look at that photo and remember what really mattered. As for me, I look at Juan every day and remember how I once thought I hated him, how his arrival seemed like just another burden in our already difficult lives. Instead, he became the catalyst for everything good that followed. His needs pushed me to find solutions I never would have considered otherwise, to discover strengths I didn't know I possessed. Sometimes the things we think we hate are actually the beginnings of something beautiful. And sometimes, standing up for what's right, even when it costs us everything, leads us exactly where we're meant to be.